Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the California Apprenticeship Initiative's first webinar of 2020. I'm glad to have made it into the new year with all of you fine people and welcome you. I'm really excited about our conversation that we are going to have today. My name is Caleb Van Docto. I'm an associate with Social Policy Research Associates. We are part of the technical assistance team alongside the Foundation for California Community Colleges. And we are here in part to help bring illumination and make things clear and support all of the good work that's happening across the state in apprenticeship and elsewise. I'm joined today by my colleague Vince Kohler, who's a senior strategist with Social Policy Research and will be leading our conversation today, as well as my colleague, who we don't actually have a picture of. I apologize. We should have, and maybe we'll do so in the future, but my colleague Eduardo Ortiz, who is also helping us with the technical aspects of the project behind the scenes. Just to give everybody a quick little bit of an orientation on our Zoom platform, and especially for anybody who's new to the CAI network and to these webinars, if you would like, we will be asking people to drop in questions that you may have over the course of the webinar into the chat feature. For everyone who's in front of a computer and has access to the visual components of the Zoom platform, by rolling your mouse over the screen, you should see a pop-up bar either below or above the top of the screen that has a button called chat. And if you click on chat, it should bring up a chat box in which you can type questions. I'll be monitoring, as well as a couple of my colleagues will be monitoring questions on the backside, and there will be an opportunity for Q&A towards the end of the conversation. And if we see any questions come in between now and the end of the conversation, we'll also try to work those questions into the conversation itself. With that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Vince, who can introduce our guests and lead us into the conversation. Vince, are you there?
I'm right here. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Excellent. And I don't know if I have control over the slides yet. I don't see the control, so go ahead and advance for me if you would. Well, I'm thrilled to be here back at the CAI webinar series, and I'm also thrilled to be working with the fine guests that are on the screen. Diana Elliott with the Urban Institute, who is going to give us a real deep dive into the competency-based occupational frameworks that she is leading the collection of at Urban, and is really making impact across the country in that arena. We'll also hear from Tracy DeFilippis and Jeffrey Forrest, who both are working in applying those frameworks. And so we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity for you not just to hear sort of the theory and the back end of how these frameworks get put together, but also how they get applied in the field. So I'm going to let them introduce their programs themselves. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a context of why do we talk about this. So let's go to the next slide. And one way in which we can think of this is if we look at the intersection between, what makes a good apprenticeship. It's a combination of what do businesses want. It's a combination of what do educators want and what do apprentices want. And if we think about it from an economic theory perspective, and I'm grossly generalizing here, but you can see it if you look at this slide, businesses are all about differentiating themselves, branding themselves, and being unique in what they do, even if they're in the same field. And to some extent, that carries into who they hire or how they describe jobs themselves. So ideally, to a company, you might basically be trained in doing a job that only they have and only trained to their standards and their particular specific ways of doing their work. And to them, it's not a big deal. It's not a big problem generally if you would never be able to leave, never be able to transfer to another company. In fact, that's kind of an advantage. So even though you might be in auto manufacturing and another entity also does auto manufacturing, the idea that your training is so specialized that you can't really go to the competitor, that's not a bad thing from a company perspective. So it's good for the company, but maybe not as good for the job seeker. So let's look at what educators think of this. Let's go to the next slide. So on the other hand, what do educators want? Well, depending on the level of education that we're talking about, this can happen at high school or at community college or even at other educational institutions, specialized training sites. You could argue that educators want as broad a level of education as possible. They might want you to be in classes for a relatively long time, as long as possible, to give them a long time to make sure that you learned everything. And they do want you to graduate, and yes, get a job afterwards would be nice, but you know, and honestly, it's not the top of mind necessarily for educators. Now that's changing, I would say, but again, I'm sort of generalizing here to make a point. So let's go to the next slide and think of what do apprentices want, or job seekers in general, but we're talking about apprenticeships programs here. So let's think about their perspective for a minute. So of course they want to be hired, right? They want to be hired at a high wage, satisfying job. And they're very sensitive to the signals that the labor market sends as to what gets them hired. So a marketable skill or a collection of marketable skills would be nice. A portable credential would be nice. Something that's not narrow, right? Because you want to be appealing to a number of employers, possible employers. And you want to be, you know, if you're a hairdresser, you don't want to be just skilled in cutting straight hair. You want to be, or just skilled in cutting curly hair, and nobody would think of doing that. You want to be able to serve every customer that walks in the door. And so if you're a metal fabricator, you know, is welding its own job, or is it part of a broader skill set? You can see where I'm headed with this. There is a tension, an inherent tension between what an employer wants and what a job seeker wants. And somewhere, and what an educator wants. And somewhere in that tension is the world of building apprenticeships, right? Even defining what makes a job, what is an occupation, and how is it differentiated from the next one over? And when are we talking about groups of occupations being able to collaborate into a single training program or a pathway, right? So that's really the area where competency frameworks live. And so I think it's worth thinking about this, and there will be questions that arise when you hear what Diana has to say about the way she collects information to build these competency-based occupational frameworks that sort of resonate with this question of, you know, what is an occupation? How do we define it? What we also know from research is that employers don't always know, and I would include myself in our business, it's not that easy to understand what makes an employee or what makes an occupation even within our own field. Defining exactly what's required is not necessarily easy, even for those who've been doing it for a long time. In fact, the longer you do it, the less you realize what it is that you do. And so this, again, is a reason why we want to talk about this today. So let's go to the next slide. So, and one more click, please. There are lots of different terms that are interrelated. Some are overlapping and some are not. And you may have heard being talked about. We're going to focus on the one in yellow today, competency-based occupational frameworks. You're also sometimes confronted and probably have dealt with minimum training standards for the occupations that you worked with. There's also a sort of a national or state view of this, the qualifications frameworks. So there are a number of different overlapping concepts that that play in this field, and we're going to maybe address a few questions if you have questions about how this relates to others. But today we're going to focus on competency-based occupational frameworks. And I don't want to steal any thunder from Diana. I'll let her introduce, the approach that Urban has taken in collecting these and really building a library that's going to be a masterpiece eventually. They're like the Webster's of occupational standards and occupational frameworks. And it's really exciting to be able to both see this work evolve, and I think is a great way for you all here at CAI to participate over time in both its use and perhaps even its co-creation. So, Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vince. And thank you to Caleb and Vince for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. If we can go to my set of slides. Terrific. Vince, I have to say that was one of the nicest tee-ups that I've ever had. It was incredibly gracious. And I am pleased to say that we do think of ourselves as building a library of resources. We're researchers, and nothing would make us happier than for people to use these documents regularly and refer to them and importantly, start high-quality, competency-based apprenticeships based off of them. As some of you know, we've been developing these competency-based occupational frameworks, or CBOFs we call them for short, for the Department of Labor for over 4 years now. And we've been really, really hard at work during that time. To date, we've created 25 CBOFs that have been officially released by the Department of Labor, and we have many more in the works, and I'll show you a slide that shows you which ones we have in the works. And for those of you who are new to our project, our team develops these CBOFs through a really extensive process. It involves researching background documents and other existing work process schedules or programs that have already been created for apprenticeship. Maybe it includes some training materials. And so once we put all of these together, we create an initial first draft. We then vet that draft with an employer and with other experts. And then we refine the draft, often with a champion, to make sure that we have the highest quality document moving forward. And then after that process, the Department of Labor reviews them and makes recommendations to us before officially releasing them by bulletin. So it's a very, very long and involved process, and there's a lot of inputs along the way. But the end result is a really high-quality document that is non-proprietary. It really reflects where industry is at a very high level with various occupations, and it creates these documents that are available for everyone to use as a resource or as a foundational document in their own. So next slide. So at the Urban Institute, we've just a few words about us. We're based in Washington, D.C. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary. And our big interest and our mission is to bring evidence to inform policy. So our tagline is "We elevate the debate." And we do research in a range of policy areas, not just apprenticeship, but we work in housing, justice, health, economics, workforce. So we're really kind of covering a gamut of social and economic policy issues. But at Urban, we really do have a very deep bench on apprenticeship. That includes evaluating programs, researching and writing, and now starting youth apprenticeship programs, and also just generally on work-based learning. And we've really become national experts on competency-based apprenticeship standards design really through the CBOF work, which we're really grateful for. Next slide. So before we dive in, I thought it might be a little bit helpful to describe what a competency-based apprenticeship is versus a time-based one. So many of you might know this, but for others, maybe it's a good refresher. So as a reminder, competency-based apprenticeships focus on how the apprentice can demonstrate important job functions and related competencies on the job. So it seeks to really see whether a person can perform the job, on the job. So in contrast, a time-based apprenticeship really focuses on the number of hours spent on tasks. So consequently, we think competency-based apprenticeships make for a productive use of both the employer and the apprentice's time. It even can sometimes make for a faster apprenticeship because people will often bring existing competencies in areas to the apprenticeship. So why should they have to replicate that by sitting in a chair? And it also ensures that the job is being performed to that employer's preferences. So we really think that, this competency-based apprenticeships offer a lot because it's really about executing the job and performing to a high standard on the job and making sure that the apprentice is doing that satisfactorily. In a lot of ways, it's how we're all assessed on the job. Next slide. So to help expand competency-based apprenticeships in the U.S. and to lift barriers for sponsors to start programs, we have been creating these CBOFs to facilitate the start of apprenticeships. So competency-based occupational frameworks, or CBOFs, are high-quality, competency-based occupational standards that have been reviewed and vetted by industry, approved for national use, and emphasize whether an apprentice can demonstrate competency on the job in various core functions of that occupation. Next slide. So why were they created? Well, I think there are a number of barriers that the Department of Labor and others saw that CBOFs could help to remedy. And the first one is to really improve the quality and consistency across programs. CBOFs use the same standard template across all of the different occupations that we develop and are developed through a rigorous process. Furthermore, if more people start using the CBOFs, then there's consistency across programs across the country. So that's really exciting as well. Second, CBOFs really meet industry demand for these competency-based models. Competency-based apprenticeships are what industry seeks. They want to have apprentices who can demonstrate occupational competency on the job, and they're really consistent with what employers generally do already to assess employees, and they create consistent employees across different workplaces as well. So that's a really important facet. And third, they really accelerate the review and the timeline for developing these programs. Because we've already created the high quality content, you can take these documents off the shelf and save some time and effort. So this can really accelerate startup for sponsors who are creating programs. But they also help facilitate the review time at the Department of Labor. So it's really a win-win. Next slide. And there's several advantages to using CBOFs. First off, they're non-proprietary. They're not owned by any one person or employer. Some employers who've created documents for apprenticeship keep them guarded. They see them as their own intellectual property. Because we're creating them, we want them to be freely shared and used by anyone who wants to start a program. They're high quality. So we're researchers here at Urban. We work and spend a lot of time thinking about how to create a document that really reflects high quality industry standards. And they're competency-based and industry-driven. So we orient them around competencies that industry leaders, including employers, associations, and other credentialers think are best. Next slide. So all of that work over the last 4+ years, we've created 25 CBOFs that have been officially released across a variety of sectors and occupations. We have another 4 that are awaiting approval, and I think they'll be approved very soon by the Department of Labor. And then you'll see here that we have a number that are in development, and actually this list is a bit curtailed. We have another 7, I believe, that we're creating that aren't on this list. So we've been very busy and very active, and in the end, we should have, we're hoping that it'll be, in the range of 40 to 50 such documents that are available for your use. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a snapshot of what a CBOF looks like. The CBOFs are lengthy documents. They're upwards of 40 to 50 pages sometimes for really complex occupations. This is just a snapshot of what the work process schedule looks like, really the meat of what this occupation is. And so as you can see here, this one shows cybersecurity support technician. And we go through and we identify the major job functions and competencies. So what does that mean? That means, what does that apprentice really need to show and demonstrate to be seen as being competent and good at their job, on the job? We give employers, again, this is non-proprietary, it's off the shelf, so they can use this. And then finally, they're high quality, they're highly researched, highly vetted. We talk to a lot of experts to make sure that what we've created is right and that it reaches consensus across a variety of employers. Next slide. So it's a really involved process for creating the CBOFs. So first, urban staff locate resources from employers, associations, trade organizations, curriculum, developers. We even look to other countries to take those baseline documents to see how people think about occupations across a variety of resources. The second step here is that urban staff and partners put together a draft that we think captures the major job functions and competencies for that occupation of interest. In other words, what are the main things that an apprentice needs to do on the job? What do they need to demonstrate to be competent? And then third, urban staff work with external partners, including industry associations and employers and others, to solicit expert feedback and refine and finalize those drafts. And that can sometimes be a very lengthy process, but we want to make sure that we have that right. And I'll share a little bit about how we did that with SWAG. And then finally, the final competency-based occupational framework documents are submitted to the Office of Apprenticeship at the Department of Labor for final approval. And once we get that final approval, they are uploaded and available. Right now, they're only available through links to Urban's website, but in time, they will be available and front and center on apprenticeship.gov. Next slide. So this shows you a little bit about how you can currently find them. Personally, I think it's easiest to just type in competency-based and Urban Institute in Google, and you'll find them right away. Next slide. So how can you use these in your work? Well, definitely think about the CBOFs as being, a possibility for using them outright as your work process schedule, as your appendix that you need to include for registering a new program. You can use the frameworks as a resource to develop your own custom program. And you can use the template. We have a blank template that we'd be happy to share with you to create your own program. But we're hoping that we've created so many by this point that we've created something that you can use and modify yourself. And please think of us and our team as a resource. We're working on this through the end of our contract goes through the end of September. We'd be happy to help you in any way. We'd love for you to be an expert reviewer on something that we have in development. So please contact me if you're interested in being an expert reviewer. And finally, share them widely. Let people know about them. Let others kind of know that there's this treasure trove of resources available. And before I hand it over to Tracy, I really want to say that working with SWAG is a really great example of how we've worked with other partners and other groups. Tracy and Jeffrey and SWAG were such terrific partners in developing 2 advanced manufacturing frameworks. And it all started from just having a phone call and a conversation about, what are the needs that you have? Here's what we're working on. Could we develop them for you? Could we work with you to get them vetted and approved? And so we started developing the frameworks. We flew to Los Angeles, and Tracy and Jeffrey brought a number of their employer partners to the room and helped us really go through and figure out by consensus what mattered, what didn't matter, what we should include in the final documents. And we created really two high-quality documents that I believe Tracy and Jeffrey are now using in their own work. So I'm going to turn this over to them to talk a little bit more about what the use case is and how this works in practice.
Okay, thanks, Diana. This is Tracy. You teed it up so well for me. Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you to Vince and Caleb, the social policy group with the Chancellor's Office for hosting this webinar and inviting Goodwill Southern California into the discussion. We want to get over to our slides. I wanted to talk real quick for just a minute about Goodwill's role. A lot of folks know us for our donation centers, but Goodwill Southern California, real quick, was founded in Los Angeles in 1916. Now, a millennia later, Goodwill prepares and places thousands of individuals into sustainable employment through our programs and services, different campuses with employment centers for the deaf, youth, and our veterans employment programs, really in Los Angeles, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. We are probably best known for those retail stores and donation centers, of which we operate over 120 combined. So fast forward, in 2015, Goodwill became Los Angeles County's manufacturing sector intermediary. In that role, we focused on creating change by customizing employer apprenticeship programs, aligning pre-apprenticeship programs, and communicating real-time employer needs with workforce, education, and economic development leaders. So now in 2020, we continue to do this work. You'll see a website listed there. That's a page off of our main Goodwill website, which really speaks to a lot of the innovative programs that we're doing. So in August of 2017, the Strong Workforce Apprenticeship Group was launched, a robust and innovative partnership between a community-based organization and a community college, namely Goodwill and College of the Canyons. And Jeffrey will talk to you more about SWAG in a few minutes, but I will share with you how we discovered the CBOFs and why we love them. So we can go to the next slide. So when SWAG launched in 2017, we included the very new cybersecurity competency-based occupational framework. Actually, Diana, you had that up on the screen. So quite frankly, we viewed it as a solution to an industrial need, twofold. One, to provide a well-structured, skills-based training curriculum for an emerging and rapidly growing occupation, and two, as a potential solution to a newly mandated Department of Defense compliance issue called DFARS. That was being placed upon all of the U.S. manufacturers at that time. And it's important to mention here that the boutique IT firms had a real need to staff up to meet the market demand of the small and mid-sized manufacturers who needed to meet the DFARS compliance. So fast forward to March of 2018, and you'll see some pictures of, on the screen right now. SWAG had the opportunity to work with Urban, and Diana and Alan came out to do the vetting process for a couple of CBOFs, one for CNC programming and one for industrial maintenance mechanic. SWAG's manufacturing standards today, and really they're in a place of revision, but today contains 7 time-based, 1 competency-based, which is the cybersecurity, and 1 hybrid work process for apprenticeship. And those work processes relate to the related instruction and the on-the-job training. So we knew that we wanted to ultimately move all of our work processes from the traditional time-based to the more relevant and useful competency-based. And, you know, we jumped at the chance to support the development. So some of the employers present that day included Northrop, Haas, The Wonderful Company, and S&H Machine, among some others. So on the next slide, you'll see a stark contrast between the time-based and the time-based and the competency-based work processes. So Diana, you had a great comparison screen set up, and this is, really a different version of that comparison. So I literally print screened a page of a time-based work process and one of your CBOFs. So I mentioned our apprenticeship program started with 7 time-based work processes. On the left side of the screen, you'll see the time-based work process for a CNC programmer, which is the ONET code 51-4012. On the right side, you see a portion of the competency-based work process for the same code, the CNC programmer. The most obvious visual difference between the two processes is that the time-based model identifies 13 tasks or job duties, and the competency-based model delineates a number of broad job functions with corresponding competencies. So we're contrasting really in this screen and in this example 13 tasks that are time-based to a total of, and you don't see all of them, but 7 job functions with 33 core competencies that are defined. So, the other obvious difference is that the time base of 3 years, which you'll see there on the bottom, it says total hours, I don't know if you can see that, it's so small, but it says 6,000 hours, which equates to essentially 3 years of time, is contrasted with, a very straight and specific competency. And I have reading glasses on, so I can really magnify this, but there's one of the time-based tasks on number 12 lists. Can you see it? Oh,
writing programs for machine operation.
Thank you. So it says writing programs. That's so general. And to compare to job function 4D, which says, can you read that?
Write sophisticated RS-274D program.
Okay, much more specific.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Sure.
So it's moving from general to specific, and then utilizing verifiable verbs, which I love, that's in the work processes, allows for the learners to know what the expectation is, and for mentors to witness skill demonstration that the apprentice has mastered, so that the apprentice has mastered that specific skill or competency. So simply put, the passing of time does not equal skill gain, and our employers do know that. So moving right along, I want to stick to my time. Moving right along to the next slide, this slide is called Leveraging the CBOFs, or I could say, how can the CBOFs inform your program development and business engagement? So let's talk about some of the benefits of working with and utilizing these competency-based frameworks outside of an apprenticeship, or maybe on the way to developing an apprenticeship. This is just a list I brainstormed for use with employers and education training providers. And so really, industry can use these to develop job descriptions. Many small manufacturers that we've noted don't even have job descriptions. And so being able to provide them this framework is really a win for them, very informative. It aids in ascertaining skill gaps. They can now really differentiate between a skill, whether someone has it or they don't, because it's been clarified. It supports internal targeted training, as Dan, I believe you mentioned that earlier in your discussion of this. Set metrics, you can set metrics for performance appraisals, and it brings clarity to job functions and roles. For education and training, it's a great conversation starter with industry. I've used the competency-based framework as a starting point for even just a discussion of what skills an individual may need to have to be appropriately fit for that entry-level or mid-level job. It's a great template or blueprint to use. Like you mentioned also, Diana, the quality example of a non-proprietary training template. It's a way to calibrate against what current curriculum you are using. And I just think it provides a solid industrial skill index for an occupation. Diana, you mentioned so well how much time is put into the research and the comparisons, the vetting, the refining, and all of that, I believe fully. And I think these frameworks really are a testimony to the amount of hard work and heavy lifting that you've all done at Urban Institute to put them together, emphasizing the word high quality, highly vetted, providing sort of an acceleration of timeline to get a process put together. And it really also accelerates the process for approval with the United States Department of Labor. And I would also go so far as to accelerating the process with the State Division of Apprenticeship Standards. So we could move along to the next slide. And I'll be finishing up my segment here. I just wanted to put out to the audience here today that Goodwill is going to be stepping into sponsorship with 20 middle skill occupations. And this is coming soon in the spring of 2020, where we're going to be adopting all of your advanced manufacturing competency-based frameworks, Diana, you'll be happy to know, along with the cybersecurity. So for a total of 8 competency-based processes, along with 11 time-based and 1 hybrid. So Goodwill is the first Goodwill in the country to step out in favor and support of apprenticeship by applying for and implementing registered apprenticeship. We're very, very excited, and we're looking for LEAs to partner with in our large region. And we're just so happy that we're able to work with such a great team of partners with Urban Institute, with the state, with USDOL, and with all of our many, many manufacturers and employers. So thank you for allowing me to share with you today.
Thanks so much, Tracy. That was awesome. Jeffrey, you're up next.
All right. Thank you, Vince, Caleb. We appreciate you guys for giving us this opportunity here at the Strong Workforce Apprenticeship Group to be with you and to talk about what it means to build a competency-based apprenticeship and taking a value-added approach. If we can get our slides up, we'll get going.
Right, we're gonna rerouting them, or we're getting right back to where they're supposed to be. So here we go.
All right.
Oops.
All right, super. And so we're going to talk about a value-added approach, because that's exactly what the competency-based apprenticeship does. It adds value to the apprenticeship experience, and we're going to cover the actual boots-on-the-ground approach. So you've heard the theory from Diana. You've also heard the way in which a community-based organization can utilize and help in the expansion of competency-based. Now we're going to talk about utilizing competency-based apprenticeship from the standpoint of a CHI grantee, College of the Canyons. And so as we go forward, next slide, please. I want to introduce everyone to the Strong Workforce Apprenticeship Group, known as SWAG. If you haven't heard about us, we're a unique partnership taking an innovative approach to apprenticeship. Goodwill Southern California and College of the Canyons make up SWAG. If anyone says, what is SWAG? It's a partnership that is teamed together to expand apprenticeship throughout the state of California and across the country. Next slide. Here are some fast facts about us. We have 12 occupations approved by the DAS and USDOL. Also, we have industry sectors that include advanced manufacturing, cybersecurity, logistics, and allied health. And we have apprentices in all of those areas, 48 of them who are working with 12 employers. Over 70% of our apprentices are veterans, people of color, women, and adult learners. Also, we are going to be soon having apprentices who experience high-functioning autism. And so we're looking forward to that, because we're beginning to provide apprenticeship training to those individuals as well. And we are a CHI awardee. We received an award in 2016 to launch apprenticeship. Next slide, please. So how does competency-based apprenticeship deliver value and add value to the apprenticeship experience? It provides lasting, definitive skill gains for the apprentice, leading to wage increases and job security, provides access to training for underserved populations seeking to obtain middle skill positions in today's economy. And let me just hit on that for just a moment. In many cases, those of us who are community colleges and LEAs, we know that there are times in which many of the employees and individuals who are going to be apprentices may not have attended an educational institution in years, or they may not be equipped to navigate a college educational system. What the competency-based model does is it allows the community college to offer education and bring it to the level of those individuals who may not be ready to navigate the system in a full way. What do I mean by that? They're not going to be taking placement courses and placement tests and things of that nature. They go right into the skills-based education. And that is really something that's an advantage in terms of getting these individuals trained. It's also an equity issue, because many of these individuals may not have the time, and competency-based allows them to be flexible through online programming, for example, to have that advantage as well. Once you have a competency-based apprenticeship, it provides for a more productive employee who brings value to the employer's bottom line, making companies more competitive. I cannot tell you how many instances in which employers have thanked us for what has happened in terms of transformation to their employees who have gone through the apprenticeship program. We just completed 18 apprentices at a shipping company, and we had 100% graduation rate and 100% employee retention rate during the entire 2-year apprentice. And now the company has come back and saying they're ready for another round. That's because it added value, and it was a competency-based approach in terms of how we conducted that apprenticeship. It also enhances partnerships between employers, educational institutions, community-based organizations, and governmental institutions, leading to higher returns on workforce development funds. And that's a very, very important emphasis that we want to talk about. When we are receiving workforce development funds, the need to deliver definitive metrics is extremely important, and competency-based education and its approach to apprenticeship delivers that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about value principle 1, working with the employer. One of the things that Tracy and I have learned in working with the dozens of employers and speaking with even hundreds more is that they want a competency-based model. They really are telling us that we want to be able to look at apprenticeship on our terms, and that is within the context of competency-based. What can my employee do versus what they know? Now, I want to be careful to say it's not that they don't care what they know, but they place a greater emphasis on their ability to come in and perform tasks rather than simply giving them a credentialing document that says they have gone through this course. And so many of our employers are telling us they want the competency-based experience. And so a lot of what we're doing is a response to our conversations with our employers. The employer provides the on-the-job experience, the mentor-trainer, the one-to-one ratio. They approve the apprenticeship hours and skills gains that have been attained. And again, skills gains. They increase wages for skill gains in conjunction with existing salary schedules. That is the employer's role. And I'll tell you this, our employers have no problem providing a meaningful on-the-job training experience related to the occupation. That is the least of our problems. As soon as that apprentice has been approved by that employer, they are going to work in the factory, they're going to work in the machine shop, and they're going to be expected to do what any other employee is called to do. And so that's the good thing about it. And they're willing to put in the effort to make sure that that employee is well trained. Why? Because it helps their bottom line. It also reduces defects. It also increases morale and retention of that employee. So it's in the best interest of the employer to provide a meaningful experience. Next slide. Value principle 2, the related supplemental instruction. It has to align with the occupation. We saw an earlier chat question come up with how many hours of related supplemental instruction or related technical instruction are required. Well, it's legislated in apprenticeship under both federal and state guidelines that an apprenticeship should have 144 hours of learning per year. That also is complemented by 2,000 hours of on-the-job training experience as well. And so 144 hours of RSI and 2,080 hours or 2,000 hours, forgive us, of what we call on-the-job training. The curriculum development should include input from the employer, and that is why the competency-based model is so important, because it already comes with the employer's input. And so now you've got a model, a work process that has already been vetted by individuals who are in the industry, which means what? It means that you, as a community college, as an LEA, you understand what the employer wants. When you align your curriculum to the needs of the employer, your chances of getting the employer to sign on to apprenticeship are greatly improved. And so if you want to really make apprenticeship attractive to the employer, make sure that the employer understands that your curriculum and what you're going to be training them to do aligns with the occupational profile that's being apprenticed. That's a very, very critical point, and that's what competency-based training does. That's what competency-based education does. And so you want to look at competency-based training, align your existing traditional curriculum with it, and interweave that component, and it will make it a lot more valuable for employers. This can include using online platforms. Employers love that, because now their employees do not have to leave the site of where they're working and go to the college or go to the Voc Tech Institute. They can actually go to college on their terms at a time that's convenient for them. And let me tell you why that's important in terms of the work that Tracy and I have done with SWAG. Many of our employers have employees that are working overtime. And so in many cases, they cannot attend an evening class. They would like to, but they're working overtime. Why? Because there's a shortage of critically qualified staff, especially in the area of machinists. And so it's not easy for these employers to release their employees, their apprentices, to go to class. And so we bring the class to them through the online platform. That is what it does. And it's competency-based learning. It is proficiency-based learning. And that's why we consider it to be so valuable. Now, having said that, we know that there may be some challenges in trying to integrate competency-based learning into your RSI. But let me say this, it's extremely critical and valued. At some point, the issue of competency-based learning is going to have to be something that all of us are going to want to make happen in order for apprenticeship to expand and grow here in California. Competency-based education and a competency-based OJT, in which they're both aligned, is something that's going to add value to the apprenticeship experience. If your goal is to have an apprenticeship that shows that's awarding to the apprentice as well as to the employer, the competency-based model definitely has the advantage in that particular arena. It's flexible, it's accelerated, and it's relevant to the needs of the employer. Those are three simple but yet important advantages of the competency-based model, and we use that model in our cybersecurity. You may have seen the cybersecurity example that was posted earlier by Diana Elliott. We actually have 2 apprentices who are going through cybersecurity using that competency-based model. Both of them have degrees in information technology. One of them has 20 years experience running their own computer firm, and yet he saw our model and said, I want to be an apprentice. And so he is going through taking the certificates and the various components of our RSI for this cybersecurity apprentice. He is a gentleman who had retired. He came back to work. He runs all of the technology and the IT for a local aerospace company, and he saw our model and said, make me an apprentice. And he is completing the apprenticeship and going through it as we speak. And so this is definitely something that the employers want. It is something that they also want to make available to their existing employers, their incumbent workers, but there's also room for it for those students who are going through getting their credentials as well. Next slide. So there's a special message that we have for all CHI awardees, and that is this. We salute you, first of all, for getting into apprenticeship and making it a part of your workforce development strategy. We know that it's not easy. We know that it can be very difficult, but it can also be very rewarding, because apprenticeship is the most effective way to provide access to economic advancement to underserved communities while meeting the needs of employers who want to create a pipeline of talent for their critical needs. Over the years, we've learned that apprenticeship is a big undertaking, and that is why we believe in teamwork. We believe in partnership. I don't believe that College of the Canyons would have been able to be successful in apprenticeship without the help of Goodwill Southern California. Our partnership is what makes us special, but it's also what makes it work. And so we want to encourage you, if you're really serious about making apprenticeship happen for the long term at your LEA, make sure you have a partner that's a community-based organization, you have your workforce development boards, and other stakeholders as well. Apprenticeship is a big task, and it's also one that requires a team effort. For more information about SWAG, more information about apprenticeship, how it's structured, how you can make use of it, how you can engage employers, check out our website and download our resource guide on registered apprenticeship. And we'll be happy to work with you. You have our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. And we thank you for listening. We thank you for giving us this opportunity to share. And we look forward to supporting your efforts.
Yay, thanks so much, Jeffrey. There's so much here, and you're not done yet because we're going to have a bunch of questions for you. So don't go anywhere at this point, all three of you. So I'm going to dive right in. We only have a few more minutes left, but there's some great questions came in, and I want to get to as many as we can. First of all, Diana, are these free? Are these frameworks free? And I'm going to add one more question perhaps, because I have an understanding where the funding is coming from. So that would be one question. But the other one is, if an additional occupation would, if somebody wants to have an additional occupation added that is not currently mapped already, is that something that Urban could entertain? How would that happen? Is there a way to at least get it on a list that then could be added eventually when there's funding to do more? How can that happen?
Yeah, so great questions. They are free. You know, we're funded by the Department of Labor, and this is a big part of their mission. They wanted these resources to be freely available. In terms of additional frameworks to create, so we are in our last year of funding on this award, and we just got our approved work plan. So we do have our docket complete for the end of the program, for the end of the project. But that said, we're happy to consult with people who want to create their own. We have empty templates that we can share with you, and we can help guide you through our process. Or perhaps one of the ones that we're creating is one that you're interested in. For example, in advanced manufacturing, you know, we talked about that. We've got machinist on the docket for this year. We've got robotics technician on the docket for this year. So we have some really exciting developments. So the hope is that maybe you'll see something that will work for you that's existing or that's in the works.
That's a great question. Thanks, Marisa, for that question. Related to that, I heard that you said a grantee here could apply their own template, could use your template and apply it to their circumstances. Is that something that you're considering using, sort of almost like a Wikipedia over time, where one could add templates that are not vetted at the level that yours are, of course, but that could be added to some kind of a repository, and then if resources permit, they could even be further vetted and made part of the official record?
That's a wonderful idea. I don't know if that's going to be in the works for the Department of Labor and for their sort of how they're going to archive this information, but that would be wonderful. I mean, I think at the very least, we can provide empty templates and help people think through the process of development. We do have our eyes on how these are going to stay current and refreshed over time. So that is a conversation that we're having with the Department of Labor. And we are envisioning sort of a wiki type process for that, where people can, add comments and say, this isn't relevant anymore, or this term is outdated. But I'm not sure that that's going to happen before the project's end, but it is something that we are giving some thought to.
Great, thanks. Question from Mark Martin about the information that's input into the RTI and OJT column. What goes in there? And is there a minimum hours, a minimum set of hours for those?
Yeah, so the vision with those columns is that you could designate almost through check marks how each competency was going to be addressed. Was it going to be addressed with the RTI or the on-the-job training? And then in terms of the hours, as Jeffrey pointed out, you know, it's 144 hours of RTI a year. That's sort of the minimum. And it's about 2,000 hours total as the minimum for a competency-based apprenticeship. It all works out to be about a year for that minimum. With more complicated apprenticeships, it's going to be a little bit longer. For example, something as complicated as mechatronics is not necessarily going to be just a year.
Makes perfect sense. Another question also from Mark about is there an issue with using online training to substitute for hands-on skill like machining, for example? How does that get rated? I know that this also happens in welding more and more, that welding machines, electronic machines are used to train. Is there any accommodation for that in your frameworks?
So no, and honestly, most of the training should happen on the job. And I think the RTI can address some of those, you know, more of the technical aspects that could be addressed in the classroom. But I suspect Jeffrey and or Tracy might have something to say about that as well.
Sure. One of the things that Tracy and I, we discourage in terms of OJT is simulation. We really believe that it really has to happen in a very real sense in a production factory or a machine shop. And even from the standpoint of related technical instruction, we believe that the RTI needs to be delivered in a fashion that it aligns. So I'll give you a case in point. Blueprint reading. Blueprint reading requires a certain level of math and geometry, if you will. And again, you can take that online, but with the type of online platforms that we use, you really have to prove that you know it. You have to prove that you can do it. And then that matches up with your ability to go on your job, take a blueprint, read it, and set the proper tolerances and variables needed on the machine in order to properly mill that particular part. And we're talking in terms of a machine type situation. And so that's really what we look at. We don't really emphasize that simulated learning process. We don't think that that's the best, especially from an OJT standpoint. RTI to a certain degree, but frankly, we prefer that all of the real training of how to master a skill, that's done hands-on, with the theory being done in, again, a very high-level quality content level platform that is challenging, that is also one that is, again, reputable and challenging and industry-based. Tracy?
No, I would just add that we do a mixture. At the end of the day, it's in some cases it just makes the best sense for an apprentice to accomplish some of their RTI online, and in other cases that just doesn't happen. It's more classroom based because it can be. Yeah. We want to be flexible with our apprentices in our companies and make a variety of ways available to them to accomplish that related instruction. But related instruction is what it says. It's related to the hands-on component, which is on-the-job training.
Fantastic. At the risk of running over a little bit, there's one great additional question that came in I'd like to give the panel a chance to respond to, and that will be our last question. You can keep questions coming online. We can still deal with them afterwards online, but this is a really good one. What would it look like, asks Jenny, for a local or regional training program to adapt a CBOF to accommodate apprentices with basic skills needs? has this been done using CBOFs as starting points?
Sure. So if I can, Diana, I'll step in on that question. So we just graduated 18 apprentices. I can say this about all 18 of them. All of them have what we would consider to be challenges in terms of their educational background. All of them, if they were to take a placement test in math and English, would test at the basic skills level. Some of them may even have issues of incarceration and other issues as well, and yet they went through our program, our competency-based framework of training, because it met them at the place of their need. And so what that means is this: they learned all they needed to learn about all warehousing operations, so they got their OJT, and then we provided training that was classroom-based, that was cohort-based, in which they could learn together, but it was done in a competency-based frame, if you will, as opposed to a traditional. What I mean by that, these classes were not in our college catalog. These were classes we created in conjunction with discussions with the employer, and then we designed those courses and we launched them right then and there as competency-based, because it would take too long to design and get the curriculum approved, and it worked.
Yeah, I think it opens up a tremendous opportunity to work with various LEAs at various levels.
Yes.
to design training and programming that complements apprenticeship and feeds apprenticeship and supports apprenticeship. So we love the competency-based frameworks, and with goodwill in launching our new model with 8 competency-based frameworks, we will be, as I mentioned earlier, looking for LEAs and working with LEAs to arrange for that curriculum to complement our on-the-job training with our employers.
Well, this is fantastic. I want to thank all of you. And it sounds like, Diana, there will be more requests for more CBOFs coming in. And also, I think it's an interesting idea that it would be interesting for CAI grantees to know who else is using which CBOF, so that you can both exchange ideas, or as you adapt them, that you find a way to share those. So it's something to be continued as a discussion. Again, I want to thank Diana, Tracy, Jeffrey for their participation today. Fantastic information. It's very useful and applied. And hand it back to Caleb.
Great, thanks Vince, and thanks everybody. Just a couple of final reminders. I've just posted in the chat where you can find past webinars. We are recording all of them. This one will be posted there as well. Feel free to visit it at the CAI Hub, located in the link in the chat box. And next month, we will have our next iteration of this year. Look out for an invite for that coming in the next week or so. It will be happening likely in the last week of February. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for sticking it out with us as we ran a few minutes over. This was a great conversation. And if you have any final questions for the group or just for the CAI in general, feel free to forward them to us. Eduardo, if you can advance the slide once more, here are our contact information. Take care, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the week and look forward to a great 2020.